When my son-in-law handed me a cardboard box and told me to pack my things, I laughed. Not because it was funny. I laughed because I genuinely could not process what was happening. I had lived in that house for 31 years. I painted every wall in it. I built the deck out back with my own hands the summer my wife was pregnant with our daughter. And now this man I had welcomed into my family, fed at my table, helped get back on his feet twice, was standing in my own hallway telling me I had until Friday. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that it never even crossed your mind to protect yourself from them? Because that was me. That was exactly me. My name is Gerald. No, wait, I keep starting stories like that, like I'm filling out a form. Let me start over. I'm 67 years old. I spent 34 years working as a building inspector for the city of Hamilton, Ontario. I know what holds a structure together and what makes it fall. I understand load-bearing walls, foundation cracks, the kind of damage that looks fine on the surface but is already rotting underneath. I thought I understood people the same way. I was wrong. My wife, Margaret, God rest her soul, passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I don't talk about those 11 weeks very often because when I do, I lose the ability to speak in full sentences, and I prefer to finish what I start. After she died, I was alone in the house on Alderton Crescent for the first time in 30 years. My daughter Sylvia called me every evening. She lived about 40 minutes away in Burlington with her husband Marcus and their 2 kids. She's the kind of person who shows up. She always has been. She's got her mother's face and her mother's stubbornness and, as I would learn much later, her mother's way of doing things quietly and without asking for credit. Marcus is another story. I don't want to say I never liked him because that isn't quite true. When Sylvia first brought him home, he was charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembers to compliment your cooking and asks follow-up questions about things you mentioned weeks ago. I thought he was genuine. I thought the care was real. Maybe some of it was in the beginning. I don't know anymore. They got married 6 years ago. I paid for half the wedding because Margaret and I had always planned to contribute, and I wasn't going to let her death change that. $42,000. I didn't resent a cent of it. The trouble started slowly. These things always do. About a year after Margaret passed, Marcus lost his position at the logistics company he'd been with for 8 years. He told us it was downsizing. Sylvia believed him. I had questions I kept to myself. He spent the next several months consulting, which from what I could see meant he spent a lot of time on his laptop at coffee shops and came home with very little to show for it. Sylvia was working full-time as a dental hygienist. She was carrying them financially, and she was exhausted. When she called me one Sunday evening and her voice had that particular tightness in it that I recognized from when she was a teenager trying not to cry, I made the offer before she had a chance to ask. "Come stay with me," I said. "Both of you. Bring the kids. Save your rent money. Get back on your feet." She hesitated. "Dad, we don't want to put you out." "You're not putting me out," I said. "This house has 4 bedrooms and I'm the only one in it. Your mother would want this." She went quiet for a moment and then said, "Thank you, Dad." They moved in 6 weeks later. 2 adults, 2 children, a golden retriever named Hector, and approximately 400 boxes of things that slowly colonized every corner of my home. For the first little while, it was fine. It was more than fine, actually. I liked having noise in the house again. I liked finding the kids' shoes by the door and hearing cartoons in the morning. I liked having someone to eat dinner with. The grief had made the house feel enormous, and suddenly it felt the right size again. But Marcus started small. It's always small with people like him. He'd make a comment at dinner about how the layout of the kitchen wasn't very efficient. He'd mention, in passing, that the neighborhood wasn't what it used to be, even though I'd lived there happily for 3 decades. He started referring to the house as the property, like it was an asset on a spreadsheet rather than a home where my children had grown up. Then he started suggesting renovations. not as a kindness, framed as investment advice. You know what this place would be worth if you updated the bathrooms? 600,000, he told me, maybe 650. The comparable sales in the area were strong. I listened, I nodded, I didn't act on any of it. Then came the power of attorney conversation. It started reasonably enough. He sat me down one evening while Sylvia was putting the kids to bed, and he said very calmly that he'd been thinking about my financial future. He said that at my age it made sense to have some protections in place. Someone to manage things if I ever became unwell. He had a friend who was a notary, he said, very straightforward. I have a lawyer, I said. Of course, he said, but this would just be something internal between family. Keep it simple. I told him I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I filed it away under things I had no intention of doing. A few weeks later, he brought it up again. This time, Sylvia was in the room, and she looked uncomfortable, the way she always looked when Marcus steered conversations in directions she wasn't sure about. She didn't say anything, though, and I noted that. I started paying attention differently after that. I noticed that Marcus had started handling the mail. Not all of it, just occasionally. He'd bring in the stack from the box and leave it on the counter already sorted. I noticed that he'd had a long phone call with someone one afternoon that ended abruptly when I walked into the kitchen. I noticed that the financial folders I kept in the filing cabinet in the study had been moved, not missing, just moved, as though someone had gone through them and put them back in a hurry. I didn't say anything. I'm not proud of that. I should have said something, but I kept thinking about Sylvia and the kids, and I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, and I kept not wanting to be the kind of father who made his daughter's life harder. That's the thing nobody tells you about being taken advantage of slowly. It's not that you're stupid. It's that you keep choosing love over instinct, over and over again until the damage is done. Marcus came to me in March with papers. He said it was a property management agreement. He said that since he was essentially maintaining the property, by which he meant occasionally shoveling the driveway and replacing a light bulb, it made financial sense to formalize his role. He said it would make things easier for everyone if there were ever an estate situation. I asked him what estate situation he was anticipating. He smiled the way he always smiled when I pushed back, easy, practiced, slightly condescending. Dad, he said, and I hated when he called me that. I'm just trying to protect everyone here. I told him I needed to read it. He said, of course, take your time, it's nothing complicated. I took it to my friend Raymond the next morning. Raymond retired from real estate law 3 years ago, but his mind is still sharp as anything, and he read the thing in about 12 minutes while I drank his coffee and looked out at his backyard. When he set it down, he didn't say anything for a moment. Walter, he said. Raymond always calls me Walter. It's been a joke since 1987, and I've long since stopped correcting him. Do you understand what this gives him? Tell me, I said. He told me. The agreement, if I signed it, would have given Marcus the authority to negotiate and enter into contracts on behalf of the property. It included a clause about proceeds from any future sale of the property being held in a joint account for estate planning purposes. The account listed was not mine. I drove home feeling like I'd swallowed ice. The thing is, I still wasn't sure. I kept thinking, maybe Raymond is reading too much into it. Maybe Marcus is clumsy with the wording, but his intentions are fine. Maybe I am paranoid. Maybe I am a difficult old man who can't accept that his son-in-law is trying to help. I called Sylvia that evening. She was picking up the kids from hockey. I asked her if she had looked at the agreement Marcus wanted me to sign. There was a pause. He mentioned it, she said carefully. Did you read it? Another pause, longer. Dad, Marcus handles most of our financial stuff. I trust him. I said okay. I said I was just checking. I said good night. I didn't sleep. The pressure escalated through April and into May. Marcus began mentioning at dinner, at random moments, that the real estate market was at a peak and that waiting too long would mean leaving money on the table. He showed me listings for retirement condos in Ancaster. Nice ones, he said, accessible, close to Sylvia. He even drove me past one, casually, on a Sunday afternoon and said, "See, you be comfortable there." And honestly, Dad, this house is too much for one person. I was not one person. I was living with four of them. He said it was time to think about simplifying. I realized, sitting in his passenger seat looking at that condo building, that he had already decided what was going to happen. He was just waiting for me to agree. 2 weeks later, he told me he'd been in contact with a real estate agent. I said I hadn't asked him to do that. He said he was just gathering information, just being proactive. I said very quietly that I did not want a real estate agent and I was not selling my house. His face changed, just for a second. The easy practice smile dropped, and underneath it was something I didn't have a word for. Frustration, maybe, or calculation. "Look," he said, "I've been managing this situation for a year. I've put in time and money." "What money?" I said. He stopped. "What money have you put in, Marcus? You've been living here for free for 12 months. Your family has been living here for free." The dinner table went very quiet. Sylvia was looking at her plate. "I think," he said slowly, "that you're being ungrateful." I stood up. My knees hurt. They always hurt now, but I stood up. "I think," I said, "that this conversation is over." He didn't speak to me for 3 days after that. On the 4th day, he knocked on my bedroom door and told me that he and Sylvia had discussed it, and that they believed the arrangement was no longer working. He said they would be looking for their own place, and that in the meantime it would be easier for everyone if I found somewhere else to stay while they transitioned. I want you to understand how that sentence landed. He was asking me to leave my own house so that he could stay in it while he found somewhere else. I looked at him for a long time. Then I went downstairs and put the kettle on. He had one more card to play, though. 3 days later, I received a letter from a law firm in Mississauga that I had never heard of. It alleged that I owed Marcus $47,000 in reasonable compensation for property management services rendered over the past year, and that if this amount was not settled, they would be pursuing a lien against the property. A lien on my house. I sat at my kitchen table and I looked at that letter and I thought about my wife. I thought about the summer we bought this house, how young we were, how we couldn't afford the furniture and ate dinner sitting on the floor for 3 weeks because we were so happy just to have walls of our own. I thought about my daughter as a little girl, drawing on the baseboards in the hallway that I could never quite bring myself to paint over. And then I called Raymond. Raymond called his nephew, who is a litigation lawyer in Hamilton. His nephew looked at the letter and said 3 things. First, that the claim had no legal basis because no written service agreement existed. Second, that Marcus may have exposed himself to a counterclaim depending on what else he'd done. And third, that we should begin documenting everything immediately. I thought I had been paying attention. It turned out that someone else had been paying much closer attention. It was a Thursday evening. Sylvia came into my study while Marcus was out. She closed the door. She sat down across from me, and she looked at me the way she used to look at me when she was small and had done something wrong and didn't know how to start telling me about it. "I need to show you something," she said. She opened her laptop. For the last 8 months, since the night of the power of attorney conversation, she had been quietly collecting emails between Marcus and the real estate agent that he hadn't known she could access, a WhatsApp conversation between Marcus and his brother in which he discussed the estimated sale value of the old man's place and how to split the proceeds, screenshots of a bank account in Marcus's name alone, into which he had been depositing money from my accounts. Not a lot, but steady, over 6 months, small enough amounts to avoid triggering my attention. Grocery reimbursements, he'd called them, utilities contributions. She had also saved a voicemail he'd left himself. He'd called his own number accidentally, in which he could be heard telling someone on the other end that the old man was getting difficult and that they needed to move faster. I looked at all of it. I looked at my daughter. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She pressed her lips together. "Because I needed to have enough," she said. If I told you too early, you'd confront him and he'd destroy everything before anyone could do anything with it. I needed to wait until I had enough. I thought about all the dinners where she'd been quiet, all the phone calls where she'd been careful, all the months I'd spent wondering whether she was on my side. She had been on my side the entire time. She slid a sealed envelope across the desk to me. "I want you to keep this," she said, "no matter what happens in the next few weeks." Inside the envelope was a printout of a GIC, a guaranteed investment certificate in my name alone for $180,000. She had quietly transferred it from a joint savings account we'd shared since her university years, before Marcus had a chance to discover it existed and complicate matters. She'd also included a handwritten letter, 1 page. It said that she was sorry it had taken her this long to see clearly. It said that this house was mine and would always be mine. It said she loved me. I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, "Your mother would be proud of you." She cried. I cried. Hector, the dog, put his head on my knee. Raymond's nephew filed a response to the lien claim the following week, attaching a portion of the evidence Sylvia had compiled. Marcus's lawyer went quiet for 11 days and then sent a withdrawal. Marcus came home one evening to find ARCMP officer waiting to speak with him about a financial fraud investigation. He didn't look easy or practiced or in control at the dinner table after that. The family court component took several months. What Sylvia found was enough to constitute fraud, not the dramatic movie kind, but real, methodical, deliberate misappropriation of funds and attempted coercion. Marcus pleaded down and received a conditional sentence, a fine, and a 5-year ban from serving as a power of attorney or financial representative for anyone. He and Sylvia divorced. She kept the kids and the dog. He kept nothing he hadn't walked in with. There are things I wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd called Raymond the night Marcus mentioned the power of attorney instead of filing it away. I wish I'd trusted my instincts when I noticed the filing cabinet. I wish I hadn't spent so many months choosing polite over honest. I'm telling you this because someone you love may be doing something similar to you right now, and you may be explaining it away the same way I did. Please don't wait as long as I did. Sylvia and the kids are still on Alderton Crescent. She asked me if she could stay until she found her feet, and I said of course, and I meant it. And this time, there's nothing complicated about it at all. We eat dinner together. Her daughter draws on the baseboards. I let her. The envelope with the GIC is framed on the wall in my study now. Sylvia told me that's embarrassing, and I told her she could take it down when she pays rent. She hasn't taken it down. Some things hold a structure together in ways you can't always see from the outside. I should have known that. It was my job for 34 years, but I know it now. I still think about that filing cabinet, the folders that had been moved just slightly out of place. That was the moment I knew something was wrong, and I chose not to trust what I knew. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was an old man who'd been alone too long and was reading shadows into ordinary things. That choice, that one quiet decision to doubt myself instead of the evidence in front of me, cost me months of sleep and nearly cost me everything my wife and I spent a lifetime building together. There's a word for what Marcus had, and it wasn't intelligence, it was patience. He understood that if he moved slowly enough, I'd rationalize each step for him. And he was right for a long time. What I've come to understand is that decency, real decency, doesn't make you naive, but it can if you let it replace your judgment entirely. I was so committed to being a fair man, a generous man, a man who didn't make his daughter's life harder, that I outsourced my own common sense to someone who was using my goodwill as a tool against me. That's not a character flaw I'm ashamed of, but it is one I've had to reckon with honestly. What Sylvia did takes a different kind of courage than people give it credit for. She didn't storm in and confront Marcus the night she first suspected something. She waited. She gathered. She thought clearly under conditions that would have broken most people. living in the same house as the person she was building a case against, sitting across from him at dinner watching him smile at her father while she quietly collected every piece of evidence she could find. That is not just loyalty. That is the kind of clear-headed, disciplined thinking that most of us never have to call on, and I am not sure I could have done it myself. I've been a father for 38 years and I thought I knew my daughter. I didn't know the half of her. The thing about cause and consequence is that it rarely announces itself. Marcus didn't set out one morning and decide to become the kind of man who files fraudulent liens against his father-in-law's home. It happened in increments, each small dishonesty making the next one easier, each rationalization smoothing the path to the next one. By the end, I don't think he experienced any of it as wrongdoing. I think he genuinely believed he was owed. That's what unchecked greed does to a person's sense of reality over time. It rewrites it. And Sylvia, her story also moved in increments but in the opposite direction. Each small act of quiet courage making the next one possible. Each note she saved, each screenshot she kept, each morning she woke up and decided to stay steady. All of it compounding into something that, when it finally came to light, was unassailable. I think about the people watching this who are in a house like mine was, maybe not the same situation, but the same feeling, that creeping sense that something is wrong, that you're being managed, that the kindness you've extended is being mistaken for a resource to be extracted. Please trust that feeling. You are not paranoid. You are not a difficult person. You are someone who has lived long enough to recognize a load-bearing wall when you see one. Get it in writing. Call your lawyer. Talk to someone you trust who has nothing to gain from the outcome. And if your daughter slides an envelope across the desk and tells you to open it,